Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we the ministers and high-level officials from the small island developing states and other countries, civil society, and the private sector have met over the course of the last 3 days to discuss the special circumstances faced by SIDS in view of our unique and particular vulnerabilities in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. During this session, we would like to discuss the key messages and recommendations that have emanated from this symposium. We will capture them in an informal communique that will be distributed to participants and posted on our website early next week for comments. We've been taking careful notes of your interventions, and now for the key messages. First, our discussions have reaffirmed the commitments that all world leaders made in the 2030 agenda to realize their promises for people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, and for leaving no one behind. On the issue of integrated implementation of the 2030 agenda, our discussions have demonstrated that many SIDS are well advanced in the implementation plans for the SDGs. They have been adapting the SDG targets to their national circumstances and priorities and incorporating them into their development plans and policies. We've also discussed that the SDGs and the commitments contained in the SAMOA pathway, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Paris Climate Change Agenda, and the Sendai Framework are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. They need to be implemented in a complementary and synergistic way. One critical point is the need to reflect the implementation of the SDGs in our national budgets. We've underscored the adverse effects of climate change for SIDS in many of our sessions and the threat it constitutes for our efforts to achieve the SDGs. The effects of climate change amplify the challenges associated with both poverty and sustainable development. Eradicating poverty and combating climate change must go hand in hand, and many efforts have been made to include these topics in our national development plans. We have discussed that policies to attain the SDGs should be informed by a sound assessment of the risk of natural disasters and economic shocks. It is essential to actively integrate disaster risk planning at all levels. It is also important to substantially increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020. Risk insurance facilities should be established and strengthened at the national and regional levels. We have recognized the need to place disaster risk management and building resilience at the center of our policies and strategies for the 2030 agenda and the SAMOA pathway. Identifying vulnerabilities of SIDS will be important in this regard. We support the use of vulnerability indices and vulnerability resilience tools in order to assess risk in SIDS and to assist them in accessing financial resources, both domestically and internationally. Another important conclusion of our discussion has been that policies are most effective when they take into consideration the complex interrelations, the trade-offs, and synergies between the SDG targets. A major portion of our conference dealt with the realization that pursuing the SDGs and the SAMOA pathway requires engagement of all parts of government and society. A well-integrated and coherent implementation of the SDGs require a strong political commitment and the continuing engagement of the highest level of government. And I want to reinforce that. It requires a strong political commitment and the continuing engagement at the highest level of government. It is important that institutions leading implementations have sufficient authority to mobilize other institutions and resources. Successful implementation in SIDS will require institutional frameworks, workflows, and practices that bolster policy coherence and support integrated responses at all levels. Institutions and ministries should work closely together across silos. Over the course of this meeting, we have heard that SIDS have been putting in place various coordination institutional arrangements, including interministerial or multi-stakeholder coordination bodies. We must also focus on local authorities to adopt Local Agenda 2030 and engaging parliaments and supreme audit institutions, which can also play an important role in advising the government on implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Also critical in our effort is to mobilize public servants around the SDGs. We need to raise their awareness about the SDGs and instill new working methods based on cooperation and consultation. Our discussions have revealed that there is also a need to bolster the capacities of public administration to incorporate the targets in planning and policies, embrace integrated approaches, and consult civil society and the private sector. A major effort is required to train public servants. We welcome the support of the UN in this effort, including by working with public administration schools. We shall also seek to strengthen the incorporation of ICTs and statistical analysis for the implementation of the SDGs. Good governance is indispensable for realizing the SDGs. We need to make continuing efforts to make public institutions effective, inclusive, and accountable, and prevent corruption in the implementation of the SDGs. Social equity should be the central focus of the action of public administrations. The poorest and most vulnerable should have equal rights and access to public services. Public services and social benefits should help overcome inequality. We encourage further efforts to fully engage all sectors of society, notably civil society and the private sector, in decision-making and review of the SDGs implementation, so as to ensure inclusive and accountable policymaking. Some SIDS have been consulting and engaging civil society in the implementation of the SDGs, including youth and the poorest and most vulnerable people. We must prioritize the engagement of youth as full partners in this SDG process, as the years 2030 and beyond are their years. It is important to ensure that such efforts are owned by stakeholders and that they have an impact on decision-making. I therefore wish to propose that as a concrete action emanating from this symposium, that a UN General Assembly resolution be proposed that encourages all member states to include the Sustainable Development Goals in the education curriculum at all levels. Additionally, we realize that the SDGs require a change of mindset in which education and training have a critical role to play. We need to focus our efforts on informing civil society at large about the SDGs and to help people understand how they can support the implementation. Finally, I wish to reflect on the issue of financing for development. Through our discussions, SIDS have recognized the importance of ensuring that fiscal strengthening takes place. We have also called for capacity building and new modalities for regional networks to strengthen our utilization of existing funding and technical cooperation opportunities. We also draw the attention of the international community to the challenges many SIDS face in accessing external financing. The criteria for allocating concessional resources should take into account the particular vulnerabilities of SIDS and help them cope with the impact of climate change, as those can reverse years of progress. One of the most challenging vulnerabilities for SIDS is the large stock of unsustainable debt. This issue should be constructively addressed multilaterally. It is important to further improve support measures for SIDS undergoing graduation out of the least developed countries category. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Wu to speak about the means of implementation and the UN follow-up to the symposium. Mr. Wu.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. As you said, overall, we think a clear message from this symposium is the continued commitment of SIDS to realize the SDGs and the commitment of other countries and actors to help them achieve the vision of 2030 Agenda, SAMOA Pathway, Shanghai Framework, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. As we have heard during the past 3 days, the experiences show that implementing the SDGs is really very complex undertaking. The tasks need to be adapted and incorporated in national policies. Silos need to dance, as one participant described, and the policies must be risk-informed. Implementing the SDGs thus requires innovating, learning by doing, and adjusting courses, and learning from one another. We very much agreed that it is the necessity to have international and regional support. As the Honorable Minister said about the importance of mobilizing resources and ensuring policy coherence. This is a part of revitalized global partnership for sustainable development that was agreed in 2030 Agenda. The informal communique, if there's consensus among all of us, I suppose it will be called Bahamas Informal Communique. And also the report of the symposium will highlight the need to build the capacities of SIDS to implement the SDGs and the SAMOA pathway. The discussions also underscored the importance of mobilizing the private sector as a key partner for realizing SDGs. There was a clear recognition of the need for launching new partnerships. We heard from some partnerships and learned about support some institutions can offer to SIDS. On this note, I would like to express our deep thanks to Canada, Norway, Republic of Korea, Singapore, OECD, and some UN entities for their kind offer for funding assistance, capacity building programs, or partnerships to the small island developing states. Your kind offer will certainly be documented with deep appreciation. SIDS need to be able to afford themselves of new technologies. In particular, we need a major effort to harness ICTs for realizing the SDGs in SIDS. The United Nations is developing a platform where SIDS and other countries will be able to identify available technologies to respond to their specific needs. Another important message from the discussion because we have unprecedented situation in front of us. Many of the areas have no measurement before. So against this background, I encourage the national governments and relevant departments to develop their own indicators in accordance with the requirements of Agenda 2030 and also in accordance with their own national circumstances. We need constant reviews of implementation at the national level. I personally hope participants will encourage their governments to volunteer for the voluntary national reviews in the high-level political forum. The outcome of this symposium will inform policies back home. There's no single model or one-size-fits-all model. With this symposium, we understand better what are our possible approaches, success factors, pitfalls, and risks. We hope to capture all these key elements in the communique. The SIDS will use the outcomes of this symposium to inform the discussions at the high-level political forum on sustainable development. The forum's communique and report could support the United Nations General Assembly when it reviews the implementation of a SAMOA pathway and ECOSOC. The outcome of the symposium will also feed into the UN Oceans Conference in June. I understand, and I'm sure that SIDS will highlight their particular reliance on oceans and support actions at all levels, including partnerships and voluntary commitments. Issues related to institutions can be further discussed in the UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration. The symposium's outcome will also filter to the partnership platform. Cisgenders should also be very much present in the multi-stakeholder forum on science, technology, and innovation. These just are some of the follow-up steps I identified. They are by no means inclusive. The United Nations is committed to helping SIDS on their way to realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. With that, I send back to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. At this time, I'd like to take an opportunity to allow the floor to make some comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Honorable Minister of the Bahamas, and also would like to thank the Ambassador Wu for the proposal that you have provided. With that proposal, my understanding is that we have a lot of work to do by ourselves, you know, but sits in our countries. Our government have many issues to do. I also do recognize that you incorporated in the informal communique or whatever you call that, what we will recommend, the issue of the mean of implementation. And this is something very important. But at the same time, I do see that there is a little bit of imbalance about the measures that we have to do at the national level, because it is a lot of issues that we have to do, but at the same time, the recommendation that we are given to the international community, in particular the High-Level Political Forum, the FFD Forum, and many other issues, more concrete, with concrete proposal, were also put here about the mean of implementation. And I would like to, if it is possible, to add to the communique some particular measures or action that could be taken for the mean of implementation to be also recommended to the High-Level Political Forum. If you allow me, Honorable Minister. First, the need to create a new international economic order based on solidarity. So it's important, the issue of solidarity, to achieve a new world, more justice and equitable to all. The problem of business as usual have proved that it's not working at all. So what the world have done so far is not working, and we need to change that. This is important. Another message is that, for example, my delegation gave here was to reform, the need to reform the Bretton Woods institution, to make them more democratic, transparent, and participatory, to allow us, the seats, to be there and to express our message. Third, to reform the WTO, to allow seats to participate in a more fair and just manner in the international trade. This is something that is not happening right now. D, to modify the current intellectual property regime to allow better access to seeds to environmentally friendly technologies. If we want to implement SDGs, if we want to adapt to climate change, if we want to mitigate that, we need, the technology. And the international property regime that exists already do not allow us to access in a fair manner to that. Another issue, to urge the international community to stop with the unilateral economic measures that are against international law and are imposed for some developing countries, including SIDS, that are the main obstacle for the implementation of their national development plans. Another issue, to reform the current internet governance regime. This is important if we want to get to the ICTs that are so important for SIDS. The accomplishment of official development assistance by at least 2020. In this moment, official development assistance that are given is just 0.3%, and the amount recognized is 0.7. We need to achieve that. So, by 2020, I do recognize that there are some countries that are doing more than 0.7, but it's not the majority of them. So, 0.7 have to be accomplished at least by 2020. Another issue, to create an international mechanism, and Mr. Wood referred to that, about to the issue of flexibilize or condemn the external debt, as well as the services of the debt, for seats at least. This is very important. Another very important issue for climate change is to fully operationalize the loss and damage mechanism under the UNFCCC. For us, this is fundamental. Cuba was struck by the Hurricane Matthew, the Bahamas also, and we know and we saw here the terrible impact for both countries. So loss and damages is very important for seats. And finally, and sorry for taking your time, to increase the level of ambition in the mitigation actions to put the world into a 1.5 Celsius degree path in climate change. Right now, the national determined contribution will not accomplish even the 2 Celsius degree. What is already on the table is around 3 Celsius degree, that for many of seats, or the majority of seats, this is lethal. So those are messages that seats need to, at least my recommendation for seats here, need to be told in the UN, the High-Level Political Forum, and the FFD. Again, sorry for taking so long, Honorable Minister. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your suggestions. All of those comments and suggestions will be considered, certainly. What we wanted to do in this session is not go through the entire list of suggestions, but make overall comments. The document will be available on the UN's website, and we will allow you to make whatever suggestions as we go through the process of finalizing the document. We will consider all of the suggestions that are being made.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency and Undersecretary General. My name is Doreen Kibuka-Masoki. I'm here as representing the World Bank. I just wanted to make a number of comments. A lot of the narrative that I've been listening to over the last couple of days has been very relevant to the work that the World Bank has been recently doing for small states. We have recently very much upped the corporate agenda on small states. We have created a small state secretariat, of which I am the coordinator of. Many of you will recall in the 2015 Small States Forum, there was a commitment made by Ministers of Finance to develop a stock-taking report, which the World Bank recently published. In 2016, there was a commitment made by the Ministers of Finance to develop a roadmap, which we are developing right now. And thank you very much to the Bahama government and also UNDESA, because we've been able to have a number of technical consultations with relevant partners and clients here in the room. Just as background, we very successfully moved the chairmanship of the Small States Forum from Africa to the Caribbean. So for the next 2 years, we will have the Caribbean basically chairing the Small States Forum. I'm here together with Minister Oliver Joseph, who is representing Prime Minister Keith Mitchell, who is the chair of the Small States Forum. So for the next 2 years, until we go into the 2018 annual meetings, which will be in Bali, Indonesia, the Caribbean will be fronting the roadmap for small states and for the World Bank engagement with small states. A couple of things that have come up that have been very relevant for our roadmap. One is partnerships. Ebba Dahlman mentioned that we've been working very closely together on an OECD and World Bank work, especially when it comes to climate resilience and disaster risk management. We've been working very closely with the IMF on de-risking, and we've been working very closely with the Commonwealth Secretariat. Specifically, and you mentioned, Your Honor, vulnerability indicators. One of the very important parts of the action plan will be how we integrate the issue of vulnerability as a criteria for concessional financing. So these are one of the areas that the World Bank is very much taking seriously and looking forward to working with many of the clients around the table. Another issue, just so I can end, I think it's important to mention the recent increase in IDA 18 resources will have a very positive impact on small states. There was an increase from 50 billion to 75 billion, which means that's over 50% increase in resources, one. But two, I think it's important to mention how do small states actually absorb those extra resources. So absorptive capacity is one of the areas that we need to be looking into when it comes to the World Bank engagement with small states going forward. So I just hope that some of the issues that I have mentioned just now can be reflected in the communique, and it can be reflected in some of the discussions going forward with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will ensure that we take note of that. And I'm sure my Caribbean brothers and sisters, that's good news for them.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much, UNDESA, for organizing this. My name is Elsie Laurent Chounoun, and I'm representing United Nations Development Program in this. I am based in Jamaica. I'm the Deputy Representative of UNDP in Jamaica. So I have been also participating in several of the discussions, and there's a lot to understand, and there's a lot to discuss. So the work is still ongoing, and I think there's a lot to do. A few things I would like to recommend, that there be an integrated approach. There are several actors, several partners working on the SDGs, and we may not necessarily know what everybody is doing. So I think we need to get our act together and see and try to map out existing and planned interventions, whether it is international organizations, UN, other partners, but we need to know exactly what's happening so that we can have a coordinated effort to support the governments. It will also maximize resources, because we know that a lot of organizations like UNDP, we don't have a lot of resources, we have expertise. So it would be nice to be able to know exactly what each other is doing to work together on this. The second thing I also noted in some of the presentation is that I have not seen too much of focus on academia, and I believe academia is important. So I would really recommend that we leverage the expertise of academia wherever they are in the world to really support the SDGs. And in this, UNDP has also been supporting government in doing what they call the MAPS, which is mainstreaming acceleration and policy support. These are missions that they undertake in all the countries that request it by priorities to help them establish a roadmap for SDG implementation. And based in Jamaica, I know that it has been a very successful process in Jamaica, and that roadmap will eventually be submitted to Cabinet for their approval, and that will guide implementation of the SDGs. From 28th to 30th of June of this year, we are planning an SDG conference that is academic, partly academic, in which we have asked call for papers. And that's going to be organized in Jamaica, but all the countries, the 18 countries in the Caribbean, are invited at the highest level to participate. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many things happening, but we need to be able to work together to understand. So then my final recommendation is really to try to really map out all the interventions of all the partners. I don't know who's going to be doing this, but I think it's very important if we really want to make sure that our interventions bring the maximum efficiency and effectiveness to the countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And I guess in short, the suggestion is that we all sing from the same hymn sheet.
Thank you, Minister, Excellency Wu. I just wanted to stress the importance going forward, and perhaps if it's not captured in some way in the communique, the importance of ensuring that there is focus on a whole of government approach. I believe that a lot of the benefits to be gained by moving forward with the 2030 agenda can only be realized when government works as one whole organism, whether it's the silos that are dancing, as Excellency Wu referred to, or otherwise. It's very easy to I guess, to default back into positions that a ministry has a certain control over certain areas. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with one individual, and that individual has many dimensions. And in order to best serve the needs of that individual, it means that government agencies must work as one organism, however they go about doing it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. President. I think the symposium is extremely relevant and timely. We have learned a lot from different experiences because we are not homogeneous. Although we're small developing states, we have our differences. But I want to suggest that at the national level, we always involve the stakeholders. Civil society groups, private sector, academia, all stakeholders to get buy-in in the development of our national plan and in the implementation of our sustainable development plan. Because that is extremely critical. When the citizens are involved and they feel part of the process, you have buy-in and you have success. So I think coming out of this conference, that symposium, I think this point came out clearly. We also need to have a monitoring and evaluation system embedded within the public service. That is something that we have not paid enough attention to. How are we doing? Because we are working towards 2030. So we need to be able to measure the progress. And so we need to have this as institutionalized monitoring and evaluation system. At the regional level, CARICOM, the well-established region, we need to have greater dialogue at the national level, regional level, to access resources, to deal with all the external partners, funding. We can work together as a region. You have the Pacific region, the Caribbean region, so that regionally, I think we will benefit more if we come together with one common approach to donors. We have heard a lot about the funding that are available. I think we need to be very focused and have our clear plans developed, because sometimes we said, well, we are not accessing the resources, and we see that in Grenada as well. But sometimes we need to reflect on what have we done? Have we submitted? How many projects have we submitted for funding? You know, because nobody writes you a check just like that. We have to work, we have to submit. So you have to, and then it's in different areas. And perhaps we lack capacity and we need some expertise. Then we need to identify them. We need to ask UNDESA, UNDP, and the other agency that have experts to come in and provide technical assistance to help us so that we can access these resources that we need for the implementation of our plan. So I think we got a lot of ideas going forward, and the symposium was very useful, and we have some practical suggestions to go back on the national level and try implementing these programs that we have.
Thank you very much, and very good suggestions. And I think one of the better ways to protect the integrity of development, the development process, is to monitor and evaluate on a regular basis, on a sustained basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister USG, we really want to join preceding speakers in thanking you for the conclusions that you've given us in what is emerging to be a very strong document, and we want to endorse the conclusions that we've heard so far, and certainly the approach that has been outlined. Of course, we look forward to seeing it, and we believe it might be strengthened even further with many of the comments that we have heard so far, including those by Cuba. I thought two of the important points that have emerged in the course of our discussions, and it's been mentioned in different ways, in terms of the formulation of integrated policies. So you have like integrated approaches, but then integrated policies, like the whole of government, they're related, but the actual formulation of policies that are integrated. I believe this is something that is helpful for SIDS. It kind of takes us away from the silo approach if you actually have those kinds of policies. Secondly, we had discussed at different points the idea of the front-loading or jump-starting implementation in SIDS. So not only the matter of support or access to resources and means of implementation, but a deliberate endeavor to ensure that in as many SIDS as possible, we can actually jumpstart implementation of SDGs. Of course, many of us have started, some are, we're at different stages, but if we can have that deliberate effort so that come, HLPF in future years, we're already somewhere along. And I believe that would be entirely helpful. The various ideas that have emerged, even if those can be put together, they provide us with a very rich package that can help all SIDS. I would want to perhaps as a political message in terms of the really front-loading of investment in terms of incentivizing progress on the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good suggestions to include in the final document.
Thank you, Chair, and let me once again thank the government of the Bahamas. They're a wonderful host. I'd also like to thank the UN, UNDESA, and DPAD in particular for supporting this very important initiative. I just want to reinforce the issue of financing, of course, acknowledging the support by donors, especially those present, but also there are some issues that came out, one being de-risking, and I know we didn't spend sufficient time on that, but that, as we move forward, particularly there was mention of the FFD meeting that's upcoming, and also the PGA's office spoke of a finance forum or something like that. I think that should be put central to those discussions, Chair. The other issue is the JIU report, the Joint Inspection Unit report was mentioned, and this is something that we called for back in Samoa, and there's a resolution, and the report is being finalized, and I think it's important that SIDS stay engaged in this, and that we drive the implementation of the findings. It's an independent analysis of UN system support, and it's important that we stay engaged in that. The other thing, we've mentioned this before, is SIDS cooperation. That has, as a theme, has underpinned the entire SIDS agenda. It was mentioned here, and I think, again, there are some wonderful models, best practices that we've seen, and it's important, AOSIS, SIDS as a group, that we look to make sure that best practices don't stay on paper, but we find ways, again, to allow them to be transferred from SIDS to SIDS. I want to take note of the Pacific Island Forum, in particular, how they're going about their work, and it's something that CARICOM Chair, I think that we can look to. And last of all, Chair, and I speak to you too as a Minister of Government, I think it's something that our leaders are committed to development. It's something that we have been about from our birth as nations. And I think it's important that we remember that as we message SDG implementation to our politicians and to our stakeholders at home. this issue of development is not starting with the SDGs. And it's important to let our leaders know and stakeholders that we've all been in this. It is, however, time to make sure that we get all the support to scale up. And to borrow a phrase from our colleague from Sri Lanka, the issue of transformation, I think, should be at the center. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And one of the issues that I equally share as important that we did not focus a lot on is de-risking. If there is an issue that threatens the economic stability of countries such as ours, it is de-risking. You know, we are one of the countries that rely on foreign direct investment, and many of those investors are US-based or Canadian-based. And if we're not able to have corresponding banking relationships that are sound, it threatens to undermine our entire economic stability.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Good afternoon again, colleagues. I would like also to join the others that endorse the proposal put forward by the Minister, and then also to add 2 more points. First of all, it has to do along line with the commitment that every government should be committed to implement SDGs and SAMOA pathway. Also the question of leadership. I think it came strong also during the meeting that national government has to take the leader, has to have strong leadership in order to implement as Agenda 2030 and SAMOA pathway. This is one. And then the second one is also the idea that we have to have strong institutional arrangements that help us also move forward, and which also has to do with capacity building that we also need in terms of seed to implement those agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions or comments?
In terms of the skills that they have, their capacities, that they're well paid, that they have excellent working conditions, and that generally they're enjoying decent working conditions. And particularly when we're talking about implementing these things, we're also talking about the important value of public services. I think those of us, particularly in the Caribbean, know that we wouldn't be where we are today without public services. And therefore, it is key that the public sector makes some initial investment, one, and secondly, provides the enabling environment on which the private sector and all citizens will be able to enjoy the benefits of the SDGs. Of course, linked to that is, where will the money come from? And therefore, that brings into question of dealing with the debt issue. And therefore, any solutions that we might think we come up with should not be solutions that add to our debt situation. And thirdly, in terms of dealing with the debt, the issue of taxation. And I think that is linked in part to the threats of de-risking, the whole question of tax havens that they label us as, all of those issues, and therefore the move towards progressive taxation systems that ensure that each and every member of our society recognizes that together, through our self-reliance, we can get what we want, and it also provides the background for others to recognize that we're pulling our weight, and therefore they will want to help us to get that much further. Again, we cannot do this without workers, and therefore strongly suggesting that while we've mentioned civil society, particularly we have to engage with and ensure that the trade union movement is a key partner in getting these sustainable development goals implemented and implemented for the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very sobering observations and recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Wu, and let me thank the government of Bahamas for organizing this meeting and for UNDESA for also organizing this meeting. I just wanted to make 3 points. First one is, I think next time we have a symposium regarding SIDS, we should all first read the SAMOA pathway. Because you know, most of the things that we talk about are already in the document. We've laid it all out. Our challenges, we've had national consultation, regional consultation, interregional consultation. You name all the consultations, we've had it. It's all in the book. The challenges have been laid out. How you implement those challenges have also been laid out. So while I really enjoyed the 3 days here in this beautiful country, I think what we want to know is the implementation. First of all, the point that Cuba made. Talk about de-risking, climate proofing, whatever you want to call it. Unless mitigation ambition comes down quickly, you can pour all your money into that bottomless pit, but you will never, ever, ever be able to help us adapt to climate change. We're gonna go under if there's no money. Means of implementation is the same thing. No money come, no development happen. It's as simple as that. So I really wanted to, perhaps, if we could put those two as the priorities of the SIDS. We've laid out our challenges. We've done our consultation. Our people were part of the national consultation, and yet they have to repeat what they've already said. So I hope as we move forward, it would be about partnership, the commitment from our development partners and our commitment to get ourselves out of poverty with your support. I mean, there's no free lunch in this world, and we know that. The SIDS know that. We need your support. Our development partners support us. We are totally committed. Who would not be committed to raising the quality of lives of their people? That's all we ask for. That's why we're at the United Nations. I just wanted to say in terms of UNDP and the comments that were made, I stand to be corrected, but UNDP had appointed or has appointed a person to help the SIDS implement the SAMOA pathway. Now, I don't know why we have to repeat or reinvent what's already there, but I think this is also the disconnect between, between the SIDS, the UN system. This is the silos. If UNDP in the Caribbean do not know what the headquarters is doing, then Lord help us. But at the end of the day, I want to really thank you, Honorable Minister, and Mr. Wu. You have a heart for SIDS, and we are very grateful that you sit there and you support us. And we wish you all the best, Mr. Wu, in the Oceans Conference. And thank you, Minister.
Sometimes it takes a conference like this and an individual like you to remind us that we have to create an intensity of focus. A lot of the work has been done. And I think moving forward, the sobering comments should guide us on how we begin to focus on implementation and providing the resources to implement. Thank you very much for your comments. If there are no other comments, I would like to ask Mr. Wu to provide us with some final comments.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think we are reaching the end of what has been very substantive, exciting, useful discussions. I'm going to be very brief. Let the Honorable Minister to sum up. 3 quick points. Number one, I came here, have a little bit of concern because we are entering the year number 2 for implementation. And perhaps some of the issues have been discussed many, many times over. People may lose interest or momentum. But I'm greatly encouraged. This is not the case. We are entering a stage of implementation. Already some success stories and lessons learned are on the table for people to share. So this is very important. My second point is that when we were entering the year number 1 for implementation, nobody knows what to do and how to do it. But after the discussions here in Bahamas, I believe everybody has much better idea where the challenges are and where some good practice already in place. Whether they are relevant to your country or not is another matter. But there are some countries, they do succeed in certain areas. This is very important. I think my colleagues and I will go back home to New York with much clearer idea what the states want, what the challenges they face, what will be their requests as individual and as collective for the international community and for their own future. Last but least, I would like to share with you some scenario for the United Nations activities that may be useful forum for SIDS. In April, there is ECOSOC forum for financing for development. This has much to do with the means of implementation and the financing. I encourage all the SIDS representatives to raise your voice, to take active participation with the support of the key elements and messages emerged from this symposium. Trying to make your points and positions very clear. This is a very good opportunity. This is ECOSOC's second forum on financing for development. And next month in May, we have ECOSOC Symposium or forum on science, technology, and innovation. Again, this is the second time. The member states will sit down, have discussions to see how their foreign policies will be informed by science, technology, and innovation, whether they could get affordable and relevant technologies to help their own implementation. Then next month in June, I think that everybody knows there will be United Nations Conference on Oceans and Seas. This is international conference organized by United Nations with a specific focus on oceans. That is the primary concern of SIDS. I hope you will not lose the opportunity to participate in this forum, this conference, and to have your case explained and trying to find your own way forward with international support. And in July, there will be a high-level political forum. Some of the seats have already volunteered to have their own voluntary national reviews. And this is also opportunity to learn from other countries and to share with them your own challenges, gaps, and difficulties, to see what kind of solutions, proposals that will come from that high-level political forum. Follow up and review at the global level. You may not expect you have a specific focused solution to a national problem, but that is the very important forum on which you have your voice heard and you can learn from others. Those very good practice that are relevant to your own countries. So don't miss that. With that, I would like to invite all of us to have a round of warm applause to our honorable host and all those unsung heroes of Bahamas government and people for their hospitality. Thank you very much. Okay, Minister, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Wu, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the round of applause. We have had a thoughtful few days. Our discussions have been powerful. They've been impactful. We have dealt with the pressing realities of our nations and shared experiences in order to learn from each other. We have seen that some SIDS are well advanced and offers of partnerships have been made. We shall continue to work with the United Nations to cooperate on those partnerships. However, beyond plans, our governments, together with our partners, must focus on a program of action and transformation as called for by the Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, we shall, in the next week, be posting to our conference website a draft informal communique based on the discussions of this conference. We shall then take the next few weeks for comment on the document. It will then be my profound honor to present that document formally to the UN. Like me, I am sure that we will all look forward to continuing our discussions on strengthening institutional arrangements and capacities for implementing the SDGs at the high-level political forum on sustainable development and the meeting of the UN Committee on Experts on Public Administration. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attendance at this meeting. I now declare that this meeting is closed.